And another example of problem, reaction, solution, and there are just thousands of these. We're going to go over a couple more. I see these reports all the time. Most notorious German post-war neo-Nazi was an MI6 agent. That's the MI6 is the equivalent of the British CIA. They're outward-focused intelligence agencies. And the most notorious neo-Nazi who almost got Nazis elected in the late 1960s was an MI6 agent. And just a few weeks ago, I saw other reports, the modern neo-Nazi leaders out there promoting and creating all of this to destabilize Germany so the government has an excuse to come in with more police state to deal with this problem and an excuse to attack their free speech and to get rid of average Germans' free speech on other issues. They're now using the threat of the neo-Nazis, and every time I look into it, every leader of these groups, even in this country, they caught the FBI Cretan Klan groups back in 1998 trying to get them to blow up a chemical plant in Fort Worth, Texas. They won a Bum Steer Award in Texas Monthly Magazine. The FBI did, which is a huge insult for criminally creating a Klan group. It's the same thing. They create the crisis, they create the threat or the perceived threat to scare you into submission. Most notorious German post-war neo-Nazi was an MI6 agent. What more do you need? Here's another one. This is the Associated Press. Germany intercepts Israeli arms bound for Iran. So the Israelis have been caught selling nuclear weapons components, cruise missile parts, F-16s, radar, everything, to the Iranians, who are not friends, folks, but they don't care. See, World War III will only expand the globalists and their power. Another article on that, this from the Associated Press. Germany intercepts Israeli arms bound for Iran. Disgusting, ladies and gentlemen. And if you're doubting the government would do evil things to you, think about all the things they've done. This is not our republic, folks. This is not our legitimate government. Our government has been hijacked. Virginia governor apologizes for eugenics law. What did the government do? United Press International. This is just one state with tens of thousands of people being sterilized from 1924 to 1979. If you came from a single-parent home and made under a B+, they would send by men in white lab coats with the police with no warrant, no conviction, no jury, no probable, no nothing, folks. This is the tyranny. This is how long our rights have been violated. It's always some new evil. We get rid of slavery, 10 other evils pop up. They would take them, women, mainly women, and sterilize them. Medical students would sterilize them. Hysterectomies, cutting out the uterus of these young girls. Black, white, Hispanic, didn't matter. And then we exposed that evil. It was going on nationwide, the hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands just in Virginia alone, and in all 50 states, right up until 1970s, 1979. Brutal stuff. Castrating men, you name it. Margaret Sanger, this big liberal, gave awards to Hitler, got awards from Hitler. How was that liberal? See, these are just terms to confuse you, folks. These folks are elitist command and controllers. They're despots. Don't let them confuse you with different phony political terms. Now they call it bioethics, and it's still going on. And Child Protective Services grabs innocent children from innocent parents all the time, just because they want to break up families and get hundreds of thousands of federal dollars from it. There's all these evils going on. So many evils, I couldn't cover them in 10 hours. One more example of problem, reaction, solution. Then I'm going to get into what happened on September 11th, ladies and gentlemen. Government-sponsored and controlled terrorism to scare you into accepting tyranny, to scare you into accepting a total police state and the federal takeover of local governments and troops on the streets, as you're going to see from mainstream news. Of course, you say, well, mainstream's lying. Well, they don't really lie. They just throw it in your face to spin it, tell you how good all this tyranny is. Back in 1962, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, headed by L.L. Lemnitzer, wanted to blow up ships. They said again, like we did the Maine, incredible, declassified, confirmed document. ABC News and Baltimore Sun reported on it back in April and May of 2001, right before September 11th. They didn't report on it after, though. The U.S. government had a plan, the government, to blow up its own ships, to bomb Washington, D.C., to bomb the Capitol, to hijack jets full of Americans and crash them, to kill astronauts in space. John Glenn, they actually list him, let him die in space. attacked Marines at Guantanamo Bay using Army Special Forces, Rangers, paratroopers dressed up like Cubans. Same system over and over again, as a pretext for war with Cuba and the Soviet Union and for a domestic police state crackdown. The Northwoods document. And they say casualty list in U.S. newspapers would cause a helpful wave of indignation. What more do you need? A few super modern examples. In the 1990s, it actually came out in the New York Times that the FBI cooked the bomb and trained the driver and gave him the detonators in the World Trade Center bombing. And then we saw in 1995 the government that was involved in the Oklahoma City bombing, just voluminous amounts of evidence there. But today, let's focus on September 11th and what really happened there, just some of the evidence, because there's just so many smoking guns and red flags it would take, again, 10 hours to even cover half of it. And then we'll look at the whitewash of how the government carried out the September 11th attacks. So please stay with us and check out everything I'm about to cover, and visit Infowars.com. Because we have a government prior knowledge section there on the website that goes over all of this, government prior knowledge and involvement section, and you can research and check out the legislation, the news reports, the eyewitness reports, the transcripts, the interviews I've done with FBI agents and victims' lawyers, and David Shippers, the man that impeached Bill Clinton, who said the government had prior knowledge and he tried to warn Bush, and Ashcroft, and in my interviews with Judicial Watch and Larry Klayman saying the government had prior knowledge. Just all of this information, a lot more we can cover here, and the two previous films I've made and the book I've written about September 11th are all online at Infowars.com. I know this stuff is painful. I know it's hard to believe, but look at history. Is it any surprise? The point is, we've got to speak out. We've got to say no. Because the government's telling us, give up our liberty for security. But throughout history, anybody that gives up liberty gets tyranny. They don't get security. Hitler promised security if people give up their rights. Stalin promised security if the people will give up their rights. Pol Pot promised security if people give up their rights. But all they got was death and destruction. All they got was slavery, feudalism. America is dying, folks. And you've got to speak up. You can't count on somebody else to do it. All right, let's go ahead now and get into the evidence of government prior knowledge, but not just prior knowledge, involvement in September 11th. Because if they just say it's prior knowledge, well, then they say, oh, we screwed up, give us triple the funding, triple the money, and give us more power. Get rid of your Bill of Rights. Get rid of your Constitution. And I just want to point out that back in 95, after the Oklahoma City bombing, that tragedy, they passed the Anti-Terrorism Effective Death Penalty Act. And they got triple the funding then. And it eviscerated large sections of the Bill of Rights and Constitution. Did we see less terrorism after 95? No, we saw an escalation of terrorism after 1995. Look at what happened on September 11th. And now we've given them all this new power and all this new funding with Homeland Security and with what's developed with the USA Patriot Act, that is the complete opposite of what a patriot would do. I think George Washington and Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson, in fact, I know they must be rolling in their graves. They're probably having convulsions down there of anger. Imagine what Patrick Henry thinks about this. Give me liberty or give me death. We didn't get freedom. We didn't get security. We didn't get happiness and safety after we gave them more power. You give the intelligence agencies more power and more control, do they really have an incentive to stop the terrorism? No, they have an incentive to engineer the terrorism, and that's what happened on September 11th. So let's go through the evidence of prior knowledge and involvement. See, they had to come out with this news of, okay, we did have prior knowledge because we're a bunch of buffoons because all this evidence came out. So they said, oh, it's an accident we let the attack take place. Our government funded, trained, protected. Why, they founded Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. So we'll look at the evidence of prior knowledge and involvement. Then we'll look at the ensuing whitewash. Then we'll look at what they're getting out of the terrorist attacks.
Coming up with this information that it admits it did warned the proper authorities before September 11th of a hijacking plot that was linked to Osama bin Laden. We're looking into this.
Tonight, the White House is confirming a report that the CIA director told President Bush before September 11th that there was a chance that someone connected to Osama bin Laden might hijack a U.S. airliner.
Now, there was no suspicion that they would take those hijacked